All right.
Hello, hello. Ariel, do you know how to tell who's watching or if anyone's watching?
Yeah. So there are a few people watching, and then also people can be watching on YouTube, but I don't know that.
Great. So I think we're good to go. Do we want to start out with some introductions?
Yeah, let's do that.
You want to start?
Sure. Hi everyone. My name is Ariel, and I am part of the coordinating body for SustainUS. I went to Paris as part of the SustainUS COP21 delegation, and I also, for the past month and a half, was working on Democracy Spring here in DC, which was, Henry's going to talk more about what it was, but it was a great experience, and SustainUS actually endorsed, so that's how I got plugged into to that mobilization. Really happy that y'all are interested in being part of the COP22 delegation and SustainUS in general, and other movements. So thanks for being on.
Great. Well, my name's Henry. I recently involved with SustainUS. I've known different people and kind of seen some of the excitement from the COP delegations, but have never been to a conference, and am not planning to be part of the COP22 delegation, though I think it's really awesome and exciting. And I was working on Democracy Spring with had some great discussions about climate and democracy with SustainUS people, and that's why I'm here, and really excited to delve into it.
Great. So
so we are generally gonna do questions and answers, and both kind of take turns answering them. Another organizer from the project, Casey Martell, might join us partway through and have some celebrity answers. And otherwise, Ariel will just be trading off or answering the same questions. We also have a question and answers box that we'll be looking at, so you can add questions there if whenever you think of them, and we'll probably do them later on. But if they're a direct response question, we might be able to answer them right off the bat, and just engage or comments, anything, and we'll try to get into it. So I guess a good place to start would be like what was Democracy Spring, and also kind of the motivation behind it. Ariel, do you want to try to take a stab at that?
Sure, I can start. Democracy Spring, the vision was to have one of the largest incidents of civil disobedience this century, and around, oh shit. Hold on. The goal of it was to target the public to really shift the understanding around political reforms, and to win, like, create and spark a movement for political equality and fundamental reform in our political process, to start creating a real democracy in this country. And was really envisioned as different movements coming together and dedicating some of the capacity to this movement for democracy, and really seeing their struggle as part of a larger struggle to have representation and true, like, meaningful participation in determining policy and having meaningful participation in governing and figuring out what kind of world we want to live in. So yeah, Henry, do you want to talk a little bit about your involvement in Democracy Spring?
Yeah, sure. So I think I got into organizing as a freshman in college, and that was really the first time that I had a sense of my own political power, and it was in the climate movement, doing a divestment campaign, and then also organizing off campus, trying to get bolder action on climate in Massachusetts. And then just like as I continued to work in different climate projects, thought about the bigger picture, and started trying to develop my own like political analysis, and just kind of came up against the problem of money in politics, and decided that was how I wanted to engage. I took actually this last semester off from school to work on Democracy Spring the whole spring, and we're getting a call from Casey, so this is the only reason I'm picking up. What's up, Casey? You're live. But do you need a link to join us? All right. Well, I think Ariel can send you a link, and I'm gonna hopefully we can get you on board. All right, gotta go. Bye. All right, I think Casey's gonna be joining us. But so I started volunteering in February, and then got down to the Movement House, was working on the field organizing team, and then also working in some of the digital stuff. And the march was really an experience that I got to be a part of and loved. But I think that was a long-winded answer. So we'll jump to the next question, which is related, and how to go. So Democracy Spring, the goal was largest civil disobedience in a generation. And Ariel, how do you do it?
I think I overall went well. I think we got a lot of media attention. We organized a lot of people to come to DC. There was an amazing march that happened, over like 120 people consistently marching from Philly to DC, really taking a lot of time out from their lives to be part of that march and the mobilization and the actions. And it was definitely a step towards building this sustainable movement that continues to show up and continues to show that we're gonna be there. We're gonna be fighting until we win. So it definitely a step towards that. I think that there were a lot of challenges that mainly came down to this. Like a lot of coalitions, a lot of different organizations that were trying to come together to do something amazing, and it's always hard. Also, I think another big challenge that I want to name is like the messaging, and I think that there are pros and cons to going for more messaging, or like what we call big tent messaging, so messaging that's going to resonate with mainstream America, and then messaging that's more focused and appreciated and resonates more with like progressive movements specifically, and like very more intersectional messaging, and by that I mean like acknowledging the intersecting analysis of like racial issues and gender issues and immigration issues into this idea for democracy and for political reform. And so that tension between those messagings, I think, was one challenge, and something that maybe the movement and for future mobilizations can really own one or the other, and be strategic about the way they're messaging. What about you, Henry?
Yeah, I think that was a lot of things that I've thought. But to give some context, Democracy Spring came out of an organization called 99 Rise, and again, the key term is political equality, and like the idea that my voice and my opinion, so that's like my vote, but also whether candidates are listening to my like picking up my call or responding to my letter in their policy preferences. So the idea is political equality, and the group originally started talking about money in politics, but then added a second wing to the demand, which is the end to voter suppression. So in the last couple of years, we've seen like a outrageous amount of voter suppression. Over half the states in the union have passed laws that disenfranchise Americans by making it harder to vote, and that's particularly the poor and particularly people of color. So this was something we felt like had to be part of our demands. And when we talk about real democracy, it's talking and going into that messaging point. It's talking about how the United States has never been a real democracy, and how that's an ideal. That's something that like we have to work for, that might not be achievable within our lifetimes, but that in our present day, it's one, getting big money out of politics, and two, ending voting suppression in states. So that's restoring the Voting Rights Act, and also just anything where people are having to present IDs to vote, or having restricted early voting. Those are impacting young people, and also to get into the climate point, because we want to talk about that. The groups that have lost the vote most perniciously during voting suppression have been groups that are most progressive on climate. So that's blacks and Latinos in the United States. They've always been the most outspoken on our need to address climate, and those are the people who are also losing their votes. So that's an interesting connection beyond the money in politics. Ariel, are you on mute? I can't hear you.
Yeah, I was. Casey, are you there? Do you want to answer a few questions and introduce yourself?
You're on mute, Casey, also.
Can you say it again? Sorry.
Yeah, you want to introduce yourself?
You're like echoey.
Casey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Okay, yes. Hey, everyone. I'm Casey. My connection to SustainUS is mostly that I'm on the SustainUS Slack at this point. But looking forward to getting to know you guys and working with you. I was the student organizer for DC DMV with Democracy Spring, and also did a lot of field work, and excited for this conversation.
Thanks. So I guess we can maybe go towards the connection to climate. So Ariel helped organize the Climate Day. That was Saturday. Each of the Democracy Spring days had a particular issue and constituency that they tried to focus on, or that we tried to focus on. And again, like the idea is that democracy being crucial to making progress and the commensurate progress, especially when we talk about something like any of these issues. So Ariel took a lead on organizing Climate Day, and what do you think the connection to climate is? How do you think organizing relates to climate around this issue? Either of those.
Yeah, for sure. So I was part of help support a lot of organizations that have been doing this work for many, many years. And I think at different points in the last like 15, 20 years, there have been moments where it's very clear that the fossil fuel industry uh, has too much power in determining or the lack of action on climate, and it's been blocked by the fossil fuel industry. And I think Democracy Spring, those organizations, naming like Oil Change International, which did a lot of work, has always done a lot of work on this, and specifically took ownership over a lot of organizing this climate day, and Energy Action Coalition, which is now Power Shift Network, dedicated a lot of capacity as well, and U.S. Climate Plan and others. And basically, these organizations wanted to spread the message that like our democracy is being held hostage by the fossil fuel industry. So that's big oil, big gas, and big coal, and that it's our political process is really just being used to further their own economic gain, and that they're not just corrupting our democracy, but also wrecking our climate and planet, and just causing a lot of suffering that is a result of climate impacts. And that there's a lot of, when you're talking about campaigns and elections, that fossil fuel corporations we've seen have funded, especially Republicans, but a lot of Democrats as well, to express climate denial, basically deny any existence that climate change is real, that it's caused by humans in part, and really just buying politicians in a way where they won't entertain any idea of climate action, even if it's beneficial for their constituents and for everyone. And also another thing that these groups wanted to focus on was that there's a lot of money that goes in through these campaigns, but also that there's a lot of money, that there's a return on that investment, and that's through subsidies, whether it's direct subsidies to the fossil fuel industry or indirect subsidies, and indirect subsidies, so like things like making it easier or less expensive to build roads to fossil fuel extraction sites where they don't have to pay the same fees to building roads like that, and just making all these indirect ways where the fossil fuel industry doesn't have to pay for the destruction it's causing, or just their costs on extraction go down, and that it makes it one of the most profitable industries on Earth, even though they're so destructive. And so this idea of the dirty energy money cycle really became a narrative throughout Climate Day, and it was on our banner, it was on the T-shirts that Oil Change International made, and it was really a part of the messaging and visuals of the day, that money's going in, but money's also going out to the industry.
Yeah, the T-shirts were fantastic.
What do you want to add about that? Do you want to talk a little bit? I think also there's like a clear connection between the theory of change around divestment and like divestment from fossil fuels, and just like taking away that social license of the fossil fuel industry to operate. What do you think are some of the connections that you've been making over the last month in terms of climate and these issues?
I love this question. I think that it is part of a bigger narrative, and I think this is also a challenge that we faced with Democracy Spring, and that the climate movement has also faced. I think there are a lot of challenges that actually the climate movement faced in the last like 10, 15 years that the democracy movement is just wading into. I think that one is not talking about the future that we want to see, and I think that really that visioning, because some people say like prefigurative, visioning and imagining like what world do we want to live in, is something that climate needs to do, and something that Democracy Spring especially needs to do, because it is an abstract issue. And talking about, okay, so we're going to make elections funded by small donors, and this is not just like Bernie Sanders, this is every single candidate who's running for every office. They should be able to run, you should be able to run an election without having to know rich people, without having to call rich people, without having to have connections. The idea that anyone, the best and the brightest among us, can represent us in Congress. And then picturing, okay, so what does that mean? That's just process. That's just like the system that goes on. This is like democracy. But the changes that we could see if we really are electing people who are serving the public good are drastic, and I think that applies to climate. I think that we could really change our economy in a dramatic way, in a positive way, if we got money out of politics, and we had legislators who started writing economic incentives that encouraged communities to own their own renewable clean energy generation systems. If we increase the number of bike lanes and stop throwing so much money into our highway system and invested in public transportation that really is crucial to economic justice in our cities. I think there's all these solutions that democracy, that drives my passion around democracy work, and especially when we start talking about shifting away from a fossil fuel economy. Did that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
All right, let's pick another question. And also we do have this, we have a question box. I haven't seen any answers yet, any questions yet, but encourage people, we can start taking those as soon as we see them. And let's see, so I guess we could talk about demands of what Climate Day had, or what generally the Democracy Spring had. Ariel, do you want to? Casey,
do you want to take that? I think you're better at explaining it.
Sure. Unless, Casey, you want to jump in on this, I'm not sure.
You take that one, Henry.
Yeah, sure. So I think that the demands are, for Democracy Spring at large, the demands were to establish a system of like publicly funded elections. So that is can be in a number of different forms. Either that's like matching small donations at a certain rate, so I give less than $150, and a pool of government money matches that 6 times. And wonks have decided that if you match it at that rate, it's really going to shift the ways that candidates raise money, and they're going to start going block to block and knocking on people's doors and really having to interact and at the same time enabling access for people who are more representative of our country. So that's like citizens funded election. That was one demand. And then that's getting big money out of politics, but also to end voting suppression. So that's addressing what the Supreme Court, the mistakes the Supreme Court has made in terms of taking out the most important part of the Voting Rights Act. There's a solution in Congress that exists that would restore that pre-clearance in slightly different legislation, but would make sure that states aren't writing laws that disenfranchise or restrict voting, and that's something that, again, like I said earlier, we've seen a lot of. So they're demanding citizens-funded elections, ending voting suppression, and then a third column being that we overturn Citizens United. So that could happen with an ex-nominee to the Supreme Court, or that could be not like another case overturning. But particularly in Climate Day also had the demand that candidates need to stop taking money from the fossil fuel industry. So that's actually an amazing impact that we can have just by raising the issue up, and that is like stigmatizing or having the public question where candidate or campaign money is coming from. So, Casey, do you want to talk about Democracy Spring next steps, or what you think could be a productive next project for yourself, for everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hop in on that. Sorry if there's any background noise. I unfortunately am walking right now. In terms of where we are in our grand strategy, Democracy Spring has built a lot of really strong momentum and energy in the democracy movement, and especially around bringing direct action to the democracy movement. As you all know, we've had about 1,400 folks who risked arrest over the course of the actions, and 150 folks who walked 140 miles from Philly to DC. So all those folks who came to DC have now gone home and have a really tremendous amount of energy to bring the fight to the local level and to their representatives and the folks in their city halls, etc. So we want to sort of give folks an opportunity to self-organize around something called the Equal Voice for All Declaration, which I can't read it to you right now, but it's essentially a declaration that candidates and public office holders can sign on to, that basically declares their support and commitment to pro-democracy reforms, including ending voter suppression and getting big money out of politics. So that is kind of going to be rolled out over the course of the next week, and we will be supporting local organizers to do the work of reaching out to candidates and public office holders to sign on, and then to do the work creating some clarity around which folks are, on the side of the people, and which folks are on the side of corruption, and on the side of big money, through direct action targeted at the folks who don't sign on. So disrupting fundraisers, disrupting town halls, disrupting debates, rallies, etc. Trying to create some real moral clarity and ask that question again, like, whose side are you on? And then in addition to that, doing the work to raise up those candidates who do sign on by helping them get out the vote, by endorsing them publicly, etc. Over the course of this election, and really doing whatever we can to make this election a referendum on whether or not we'll have a real democracy in this country. And there's also discussions around what sort of larger direct action targets we might have. There's talk about the conventions and partnering with Power Shift Energy Action Coalition to do an action at the DNC. There's talk about targeting the call centers in DC where Congress men and women and representatives, etc., go on the daily to make fundraising calls to individuals who are able to drop, you know, $1,000, $2,000, $10,000 when they're called by someone. So targeting those places, and just really trying to think about how we can articulate this movement to the general population, and also articulate to our politicians that this movement is real and has power. And I think it's a big challenge for the democracy movement that we don't have, that it's so abstract as about, that we don't really have that many targets that paint a clear picture for folks, and the way that the climate movement has. We don't have the opportunity to actually shut down the system very often. So that for me is a big question moving forward, is how to paint that clear picture for folks through the Equal Voice for All Declaration, through direct action, through raising up candidates who have signed on.
Okay, great answer, Casey.
Did you catch all that? I think I may have lost service at a point there.
Yeah, I think we got almost all that.
Sweet.
And Ariel, are there any questions you wanna?
No questions. I don't see any questions yet. If you're watching from the Google Hangout, I think if you open, there should be on the left-hand side a panel, and you can open the question box. Pretty sure that works. If not, I'm going to try to screen share for a second, because I want to, yeah. So this is, can you see that? I think you can see that. If you go, I shared the Climate Days messaging doc and made a bit.ly. So if you go to this website, just put this into Google Chrome or Safari or whatever, and you can see our messaging doc, and that can help like just talk about these issues. And also, if you were to write anything, there's definitely like a lot of information there, and it's open, yeah, for anyone. And then also wanted to write down Henry's email address. I think it's here. Wait, I'm gonna stop screen sharing and do that after. I'll also talk a little bit about, do you want to talk a little bit about Power Shift Network stuff and the action team, or I can?
You got it.
Okay, so along the same steps, so Casey's doing a lot like from the Democracy Spring core team, and I think another way to get involved is by joining the Power Shift Network. So the Power Shift Network, if you've heard of Power Shift convergences that have happened in the past, it's trying to like reinvigorate the youth climate movement from a few years ago, and trying to like be this large network of people. And one of the projects and ideas that some people that are already involved want to move forward is working more closely with the Democracy Spring folks and really being like a home for continuing to draw these connections between fossil fuel money and politics and voter suppression, and these and integrating those or like establishing the connections between the climate movement and this emerging democracy movement. So we are trying to build out a team like representing a few different people, representing organizations and also just a lot of individuals. And probably will be having trainings and workshops at the different PowerShift convergences. I think Henry or Casey mentioned the one that's in Philly in July at the Democratic National Convention, and then there's one in Detroit in August, and on the West Coast and in Florida in September and October. And then you can go, I think you can go to wearepowershift.org, but you just search PowerShift Network. You should be able to find more information about that. Yeah. Check.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to see the connection continue to grow, and also see how the democracy movement can learn from the climate movement. I think that PowerShift, just to plug PowerShift, it will be an amazing experience to really connect with people who are organizing at all levels, at the national level, at the local level, also a lot of youth, and I think that that's something that Democracy Spring could really grow into and feed off of, is more youth engagement. So if you're applying to represent SustainUS at COP, great, but either way, if you are or if you aren't, come to a PowerShift, find the closest one, find one that will be talking about an issue you care about, because they're going to be really exciting spaces. So I also am going to go on the record and say that even if you don't, we'll figure out how to get you involved with the Democracy Spring PowerShift Network Action Team, and I'm hoping to be involved with that. So if Ariel can screen share again, she'll put up my email address. It's Henry, which is my first name, dot JACQZ at either Gmail or sustainus.org. So gmail.com or sustainus.org. Just got that, so that's a good email to reach me at. And I would, even if you just have a question, send it along, and I'd be happy to talk also with you.
Cool. Can you see that? Maybe? Yeah, it should work.
Yeah, I can see that works. All right.
Cool.
Gotta write this down. Let me write it down.
Awesome.
Okay, so if you have any questions, email me right now and I'll check my email. Still haven't gotten a question from the crowd, but I don't know. We could keep going if
you wanted to. I think it would be awesome to talk a little bit about. Sorry, there's someone in here. Like a few ideas for op-eds. If you were like, if you could just write, like themes or ideas that you think would be good points to make, or even like, I think writing something that's more local for people is one idea, but then there are also, like, if you have any ideas for op-ed, just like presenting them, be like, yeah, that'd be cool to write about. I'll think while you talk.
So me, you want me to take a shot at that?
Yep.
Got it. Yeah. So I think there are a couple angles you can take, and there's the angle that is like about our voice and our voice in government. You can talk about that as a young person and feeling like we're doing all this amazing organizing. If you look at public opinion polls, more than half of our country would love to see like dramatic action on climate change, and an even greater percentage, I think a supermajority at least, would like to just see more clean renewable energy. So how is that possible? How are all our like intentions and wants and better knowing that this is really where we got to go and where we got to go quickly, how is that being ignored by our Congress and democracy being kind of a fraud, and talking about how our lived experience or our experience as organizers shining a light on that. So that's kind of like the credibility that you're bringing to the op-ed is like, I have been working to advocate for action on climate, but we're not making progress, and democracy being broken, money in politics being a problem. So that's one angle. That's like our voice. I think another angle is really like this kind of more the solutions oriented. I think one really strong point that Ariel made was about the return on investment. I think that's a really like just like mind-blowing statistics, how they can spend $1 on lobbying or on campaign finance. I think it's actually campaign finance the fossil fuel industry and get $119 for that $1 in subsidies. So that's really like a statistics. The statistics can be a good way to open an op-ed, but there's a lot of if I were going to write an op-ed, and you can take this and beat me to it, but I'll try to write it first and win the contest. I would write about how a real democracy, so a democracy where our representatives are representing us and everyone's voice matters and everyone's vote matters. I think that getting that, securing that, or going towards that is going to enable us to have what people in the climate community are calling a just transition. And a just transition is realizing that climate is this huge issue, and it's really about changing our economy. And there's a lot of different ways you could do that. You could reduce the amount of carbon pollution we're putting into the atmosphere in ways that are just, and also you could reduce it in ways that are going to make the rich richer, that are going to create like health or ecological problems for communities that are close to maybe the mining of a heavy metal that's going into a solar panel. And so I think that as long as we have a government that is looking out for wealthy special interests, we're not going to have the just transition we need. We're not going to be able to take care of people when things get worse. Climate change is happening now, and I think if you look at the response to Sandy or to Hurricane Katrina, we see like just vast failure of our federal government to look after our people, Hurricane Katrina especially. And that's an example of why we need to really get a government that's looking out for everyone, no matter like in the mitigation and then also in the adaptation. And I think that's a real conversation that's going on, but has very strong connections to democracy that haven't been made. And so I'm going to start writing and hopefully you won't beat me to it. But I think that's an op-ed. Any ideas, Ariel?
No. I mean, I think a little bit of something that I would be interested in writing about is just like expecting that so we're going on this completely transforming our energy system. That's going to happen because for survival of human sake, it needs to happen. And solar is like beginning to take off in certain ways. So there's all of this, not only money to be made, but a lot of wealth that's going to be transferred from the fossil fuel industry to solar. And there's an opportunity for communities and for people and not just corporations to take hold of some of that wealth. But for that to happen, we need a political system that is not entrenched to big money and corporations, and that's at a local level. So you can't have communities that are dependent on big solar because they're not going to, the wealth's not going to be democratized. But if we can figure out a political process where like there's representation and communities actually are able to voice the fact that they either through cooperatives, solar cooperatives, or public utilities want some of that, or like are demanding some of that wealth, we could see a lot of wealth that's being generated through the transition to actually be owned by communities and people. So we need these kind of fundamental reforms in our political process, and that's, voting is the minimal. We don't even have that. That's where I see that this is personally like really, really crucial, and I would trying to figure out specific ways to frame that, but yeah, just to throw it out there.
I can throw in a couple of quick thoughts on things that folks might want to work on in terms of op-eds and memes and whatever. One thing I'd really like to see us do is I think, well, so first of all, the connection between big money in politics and the fight for to end the influence of fossil fuel money is a pretty clear connection. But I think the connection between voter suppression and the climate issue is something that's not been articulated for folks, and it's something that I'm only just beginning to really think about. But I think that would be a really powerful thing to try to articulate. I think environmental racism is one lens to sort of start looking at that through. And then another thing to think about is just talking to folks about the tool of direct action, and especially to young people who, at this point, lots of young folks don't know anything to do except to vote for Bernie Sanders, right? And to be able to articulate the power that we have to create change through direct action in both the democracy movement and in the climate movement is something that I think needs to be hyped more.
Yeah, I'll second that. I think that that was one thing that Democracy Spring was inspired from the climate movement about is the direct action component, and obviously direct action has been used in many movements in the past, and is part of the Democracy Spring theory of change for maybe historical reasons. But I think that climate recently with tar sands most prominently, but now in spring free actions, and also just lots of direct action in local pipeline fights or fracking or really across the board. And I think that direct action really has something powerful in exploring that in climate and in Democracy Spring context is another angle that I'm glad Casey brought up.
Awesome. This is great.
Yeah, Casey, any last thoughts?
Last thoughts generally?
Generally.
Yeah, let me really quickly look at my notes.
Okay, well, I guess I'll say thank you anyone who watches this after the fact. Thank you anyone who watched it now for showing up. And my email again is henry.jacqz@gmail.com. Go to PowerShift, write some awesome op-eds, and keep on staying engaged, no matter where you are or what you're doing.
Great. Yeah, looking at my notes, it looks like we covered pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. So just want to second what you said, Henry. Thanks, folks, for jumping on, and looking forward to working with you all, and really tying our movements together.
Yeah, thank you to anyone who's going to watch this or who has been watching it. And I would be more than happy to talk to anyone that's thinking about writing something or just wants to throw around some ideas. You can also email Morgan. I know that she's been super excited about all the interest that's being generated through this creative challenge, and she's also an amazing writer and has written a lot herself, and she's a great asset, and definitely like feel free to reach out to her. And yeah, definitely like don't think that this is like the only opportunity to get involved in SustainUS or PowerShift. They're really open spaces, both of them, and we need more people organizing, we need more people part of this movement. So we're really excited, and you are more than welcome always.
Amen. And
Amen.
folks, feel free to reach out to me if you're feeling like really inspired to plug into the work that Democracy Spring is doing. I'm kenneth.martell@greenmtn.edu or 603-831-3267.
Thank you so much.
And really would be psyched to talk to anyone who just wants to run some ideas by or figure out how to plug in.
Thank you so much, Casey, for joining us and showing us your forehead. I guess.
My pleasure. And Henry, looking really good with that new haircut.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. So I think I might close it out. Is there anything else we want to add?
Not over here.